Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Bloodbowl Live for our Monday Night Roundup. Once again, welcome back. We're very happy to have any and everyone who's joining us for yet another roundup. It's our first full week of fixtures this week. So we've got lots of games to go through, many touchdowns to go through, some incredible results, some very close games as well. And once again, I am so pleased to be joined by friends, because normally I'm there alone, which I'll have to stop saying soon because I've had friends for the last few of these. First up, we have back again from the Gentleman's Collective, Mr. Scott Bryant. Scott, thank you so much for coming back. And we are joined this week. Tom, I believe, is listening in his car on the way back from work. But there's still three of us. We have got coach of the Gilded Knights of Cerulean, Phil, joining us this week. Phil, welcome to the roundup. And before we start the roundup, it is December. And in December, me and some friends of mine, none of which are in the league, do a beer advent calendar where we exchange 25 beers with each other. My beer for the day is, I thought I'd share this. It's beautiful. It's called Schnoodle Pip. Um, and it is a beautiful fruit sour. It's very sour, it's quite strong, and there's a lot of it, and I'm going to have a very fun roundup because of it. So I thought I'd share with you my beer of choice. Scott, you look like you've got a lovely cup of tea. Well, we'll dive straight in to our first game because we've got quite a lot of games to go through this week. It's the first full week of fixtures, and the first game that we had, the first game played this week, and our first stream of the week was our champions versus champions, Writers Rams versus OTFC. So, two-time champion Rich coming in with his redrafted Rams for the third season in a row. James bringing in a new team, his Ogres coming into this game. Um, and Scott, we'll start with yourself. I looked at this one and I think I think had it been anyone but James, who we know is very good, who we was our first champion, is a really great player. Had it been anyone but James, you would have probably said Rich was walking away with this fixture on paper. Ooh. Now they do. I didn't turn you guys on. Oh well. Sorry, guys.
Professional, ladies and gentlemen.
Apparently they don't have me either. Do you not have me either? No audio from anyone other than Chris. Okay, okay, we're all here. See, if I knew anything about live television, I'm sure this is what it's like. Um, Scott, yes, on paper. Good evening. on paper, this is an easy win for the Rams, right? But James did something great.
I fully agree. This was really a match all about Nanny. Nanny, everybody's favourite, beastman runner, linesman coming in, casualties galore to start with. And it looked for James as if he was going to be up against it as well. But he did take the lead in terms of, he had the big G, the griff. And when you've got the griff, you're always going to give people headaches. So kudos to both players. It really was a slugfest that they were going for it. So really, Seesaw, great one to watch. And then, of course, Nanny picked up an injury after dishing it out. She took a bit back, and as a result, now injury missing next game. So all in all, a really good match. Great start for the season, unbeaten, especially for James and his Ogres. So it sets up this league very nicely indeed.
It does throw something out in this one because the stunty team, any stunty teams are going to be sort of on the lower end of the uh, you're not going to expect as much from them as far as progressing, which is unfair because if you play them right and you can get the right star players in, and as we've seen this season, they can do really well. And Griff is a mega star for a reason, absolutely a megastar for a reason. So this does really throw this group out because I think from Rich's point of view, um, And Phil, I don't know what you kind of think on this bit. From Rich's point of view, he's the only redrafted team in this group, I believe. It's him, it's James, it is the double yolks as well, and my brain is letting me down as to telling me who is the other team in this group. Actually, I've just completely got a blank. Cruel Britannia. Nick's Cruel Britannia. So he's the only redrafted team in this group, so he's giving away inducements to absolutely everyone. So maybe more than in other situations, him losing such a skilled player and reducing his team value, maybe not as much of a hit against him as it might be if he were in a group with other redrafts. Phil, what do you think?
No expert in what his team is like. Having played against a team, my only game so far, that was a redraft, I believe. I think Elliot's team is redrafted.
Yeah, Numpty's absolutely, yeah.
He decided to take out one of his players in order to reduce his team value for my game. And I think that then probably helped him because it meant I was literally just a bog standard team. There was nothing I could really add to help boost me. And well, we'll see later what happened to me. But whether losing such a big player is gonna be that, effective. I don't know what else he's got available to him.
He's got a very strong squad. He's got a lot of skills. I mean, Nani is his third or fourth highest value player. In a group against lizards with dodge, in a group with quite a few players with dodge that he is up against. It is kind of like he's got tackle on Nani, which would have been very helpful. Block is always very good, and Mighty Blow is going to help break already weak armor. So yeah, it's interesting that he's got kind of he's still got a lot of skill there, but he's now going to be giving away. His team value is now just a little bit less going into his next game, which is going to really help him not give away quite as many inducements. He's still going to be giving away a fair amount because Cruel Britannia's team value is only 870, so he's still giving away a lot there. Double Yolks is 970, still giving away a lot there. But I think looking at some of the other groups around, maybe he's not going to suffer quite so much at losing this player this early on as others might be.
I think when you talk about that's an interesting point. The next game in the development of this league, Chris, if Rich decides, is he going to go for the double header against James straight away? Because you're right, Nani's out. Just looking quickly, the ogres, where they had all their injury, it wasn't against the big men. It wasn't against the ogres as well. So they're going in with the 4 ogres still for next term. Plus, of course, we know James can play with Griff. Not in that particular way, if anybody's thinking of a cheap euphemism and a laugh there. But James knows how to sort of get around the pitch with a star player and to utilise it as well. If Rich does go up against him again, or if he goes up against the double yokes and the lizard men, Sam, I believe, is going to be running 6 blockers in that team. So it's quite going to be a lot of strength 4 versus strength 4 in terms of the blockers as well, as you look at that. Oh, sorry, strength 3 with the runners for the beastmen. Interesting what's going to happen. So there's a couple of 100K, but as you say, Nick's going to have a bit of a smorgasbord to choose from. Is he going to go for a couple of star players? Are they going to try and how is he going to manage it in terms of going up against it? So again, it really sets this particular division up very nicely for the next few rounds.
I think it's going to it's thrown maybe an immediate not spanner in the works, but it has immediately kind of caused maybe a bit more intrigue into this group than we thought. Because I still think Rich is getting out of this group. I still think he is going to progress, just because I think he's got a lot in that squad at his disposal. James is the most experienced coach against him in that group, so for him to draw against James, James is very good. Um, not saying that Sam and Nick aren't, but James has a lot more experience than both of them. So of all the people to slow Rich down, I'm not surprised that James really gave it a great go there. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how this one goes forward. We've had we saw last week Rich versus Crawl Britannia. W Oaks haven't played yet, but I know that they're keen to get a game in, so it'll be interesting to see what the next kind of fixture is on this one. Um, we'll move on to the next game of the week. If we can, let's have a look. The next game of the week, which was our guest from last week. A huge thank you to Jane for coming and joining us last week against the Tetanus Hotspews. Um, and Jane won't. I don't think Jane will mind if we say that she has got a really, really difficult group to get out of. I think of most of the people out there, she is probably a coach who's got one of the biggest hills to climb. Um, and while she's come out of this game with no points. She's come out of this game with a 1-0 loss. But she really, again, for the second time in a row,
Yeah.
has given an experienced coach something to think about and made it a very, very difficult win to get. Um, Phil, Scott's squad is very, very strong. He's got all those sort of mutations and stuff in there, um, and this was made difficult for him by Jane. It was a good try.
As well, I was there while this game was going ahead. I managed to watch some of it, and it was so tight packed in one part of the pitch, and I could see at the end. I think towards the end of, I don't know, I think it was the first half possibly or something. I know Scott was getting frustrated with what some of Jane's players are able to do, or were getting away with doing. Because I think, if I'll just quickly have a check. I think there's a ghoul runner, possibly, or a line. I don't know if it's a ghoul runner or a lineman that had got the ball just on the verge of Scott scoring. Out of nowhere, this one of James' players came along, managed to knock him down, pick up the ball, and like I say, that everything was so compact, because if Jane was trying to move away with it, she would just run into more of Scott's players. What players they were, I couldn't tell you.
I
Still,
know,
still learning, but that's.
I know that in this game,
I think Scott was also trying to stall. I think.
yeah.
Yeah, he was
So
trying to do that, and
so we
ended up
had
trying to stall him for too long, probably.
yeah, we had this last season where we had John had one occasion where was too tempted to push a player off the pitch, and in doing so, didn't. Yeah, he was stalling, too tempted to push play off the pitch. That failed, didn't get his touchdown, and he managed to win after it. And he was very grateful that that is something he did. We've got Justin in the chat saying he tried to serve Justin, and it failed, and he didn't get that touchdown. He went on to win, but at half time, it shakes you that you could have gone in 1-0 up and you didn't. Rich last season, he was stalling and could get a turn 8 touchdown. He decided to go for a foul in the middle of the pitch and immediately got sent off. And once again, turnover. He went on to win the game, but again, it you know, going in at 0-0 and going in at 1-0 are very
Yeah.
different things. And Scott in this game stalled in that first half, and it came back to bite him. And stalling is a perfectly valid tactic, and I'm sure we've all been stalled against in one way or another, and it's absolutely valid. And I think the thing with stalling is if you stall and then you don't get the touchdown, I think from the perspective of the person who stalled, I imagine that feels much, much worse than than a lot of than a lot of else you could come up against. Scott the Hot Spews maybe Hot Spews said it was stupidity rather than hubris. What do you think?
Well, whilst we had the stream of Rich and James on the other side, some of the commentary that was coming across from this table was wonderful. James' enthusiastic profanities were a thing to behold, and exactly as Phil just said there, you could sense the frustration coming out from Scott. Little bit of saltiness creeping in, I thought at times, which always makes for entertaining. But no matter what it is, you always know it is a very good team. Scott knows his way. And even, when it was getting towards the later stages, you always thought, is there going to be a last minute touchdown? Anything from sort of turn 14 onwards. It's the classic Scott Phipps almost. It's his signature move, shall we call it. So very harshly done for by Jane on this one. I thought it was deserving of a draw. But Scott Phipps, came through as he always does.
Yeah, I think Jane has had two games where she has really thrown opponents off and maybe deserved to come out of it with whether she's deserved to come out of it with a win. Is probably not my place to say, but I think she probably deserves to come out with it with a point or two. For she's come in with quite a ballsy strategy. Not many. She's come with lots of zombies, not many positionals, and she is throwing people off because she doesn't. And she found this with her first Amazon season, that she would throw off opponents because she didn't play the way that maybe you would expect the team to play. So you go into a game with a team that is not good at throwing, and you start throwing the ball around, you might throw people off. That kind of thing. Jane likes to play what's fun, not necessarily how you maybe on paper should with your team, and I think she's throwing people off again, which is really great. Scott himself will acknowledge that what Jane did really well in this is he absolutely got in Scott's head, got Scott frustrated, and he will acknowledge that last season in his last 16 game against JD, JD really frustrated him, and that game went on to extra time, and Scott won it in extra time, but JD made it really, really difficult. So getting into a player's head through however that is, it works, and it really worked in this situation. Um, it's 2 losses from 2 from Jane in a very, very tough group, but she is really causing people trouble. I would love her to cause an upset and get through here. Do we think? I know that 2 losses from 2 doesn't mean you're out, because I've done it myself in previous seasons. I've lost the first 2 games and managed to get out of a group. In a group like this, how difficult is her task, Phil, to get out of here?
Uh, I mean, in my first season, I had 2 losses and managed to get out with what was basically a virgin elf team with nothing extras on it. And I was against some pretty decent players with some pretty, powerful teams. I mean, my final group game in that season, I was probably lucky with quite a few dice rolls, and all you need is that one lucky dice roll, which would completely change the game around and get you enough extra points to get yourself through. So you definitely wouldn't give up. Yeah, it definitely opportunity to get through.
Scott, you think the same?
Fully agree with everything Phil's just said. And what I would also say is, because I progressed with 2 losses last year. I think if we look at last year and the wild cards, there were teams progressing with 3 losses. So I think it's very much Jane's in the mix. Second match in, I think she's only going to learn and get better. We know as well, there's got to be the rematch, the Hot Spews. The match with John didn't go ahead with the Iceborne on Friday. So looking forward to seeing how that goes. I think for Jane, if she can come out of the third match with a result, win, draw be great, but a result, a win would be fantastic. And I think it'll just open it. I think if she doesn't get the win in match 3, then match 4 is going to be her cup final. But I think still very much to play for.
I hope she pulls it off. I really do, and that's not just because both of my D&D characters that she is the dungeon master of are both hanging by a thread and imminently going to die in one way or another. So, but yeah, no, I do hope she pulls something off and gets out of there. We'll move on to the next game, and we're going to jump on to Flumps versus Odin's Ravens, which quite frankly fascinating. And I know that Scott is probably watching. Um, and JD asked me on Sunday. He said, "Are you doing the roundup this week?" I said, "Yeah, of course we're doing the roundup." And he said, "Yeah, yeah, I want to watch the roundup this week because I actually had a good game." This isn't that game, so JD, hang on, we will get to your other game. I promise, we will get there. Um, uh, Phil, these goblins are really causing some upset. They are, they're one of two goblin teams in the competition. You've got goblins in your group. I know you haven't played them yet. They are only taking stunty players, so there's no trolls, no star players that are bigger than that. Um, they had a good result, a draw against Skaven and some good casualties, and they've come in against a bashy team with lots of block, and they've taken charge from the off.
I was watching Scott's game. I think it was the ending of his game on Friday, which will be the other one we go to. And I was trying to get my head around what all his players could do, because I say, like you said, they're all sort of stunty players, but the amount of things they can do, and there's one of them that can have multiple turns or something like that. I'm not sure which one that is, but it could like go twice or whatever. And being able to have that movement, I think he's obviously chosen to have the movement and the stunty players to move around rather than a big guy, and it's well working.
I think I find that big guys will either win you or lose you games. Um, as the one that is in two pieces somewhere around the county. I don't know where that rat is at this point. Um, uh, I think they can either win you or lose you games. So to not take them, to put a lot of trust and know that you've got the inducement money to take. He took Fungus the Loon, he took Bomber Dribble Snot, he took two bribes. Looking at the way that this game went, there was. Um, it doesn't look like at any point, unless it wasn't logged, and I don't think it wasn't logged. I think because he had those bribes, secret weapons that just didn't get set. He managed to. He's keeping secret weapons on the pitch for a really really long time. And Scott, you play a Skaven team, so you know what it's like to have quite thin armor. The Norse teams have as thinner armor as Skaven. It's mostly 8, except for 9 on one player. Um, when you know you're facing all of those different weapons, it's they maybe have less strength than you, but it is daunting at what they can do to you.
I fully agree. It's the curse of the stunties. When you might knock them out, you might sort of, go through the armor time and time again. If you're lucky, though, you might get 1 in 6 will actually go through to an injury. It feels at times with stunties, yes, you'll go through the armor, but when it comes to the injury, it's stunned, it's stunned, it's stunned, and they just keep coming back and back again. And as you say, Scott's playing it. He's got two secret weapons in there. He's got the fanatic. He's got the loony. And just looking at it, he's got one of his goblin linemen who has 15 SPP. Now, what he's going to say? What are you going to spend all of that delicious SPP on, Scott? We'd love to know.
Uh,
So
yeah.
there's lots of opportunities in that. But again, it's got to be a good coach to play this team. I think he's doing a great job. I think hopefully he'll really encourage a lot more people to think differently outside the box in terms of when they look at their team compositions.
Yeah, because you go into when you take I think when you take a stunty team, you do go into any especially a league, you probably go in as a bit of an underdog. Tournaments, you know, you can you're going to regen, you're going to get star players and all of this stuff, and I think it's a bit different. But you definitely go in as an underdog, absolutely, to a league, and he's really like I think he is very quickly becoming a bit of a kind of fan favorite. Like if all the other coaches have a team that at this point in the season, based on who's played, someone that you want to watch, like from an excitement and chaos and sort of energy point of view, I think he's sort of got that
I mean,
position. Um, let
his all but one player on his team has dodge, and that must be a nightmare to try and control for an opponent. To have them dodging everywhere, going all which direction is like, how do you stop that amount?
Yeah. If you don't have block, it's one roll on the dice that is just taken away from you, isn't it? So it's really challenging. Let's just talk about JD's Odin's Ravens, because JD previously he's had 2 seasons with Korn where he's just gone out for blood. That's pretty much what he's done. And actually, to be fair, in season 4, when he took his Korn team, we didn't have wild cards. If we did, he was comfortably the third best. He was comfortably the top wild card. He came third in his group with 14 points in a group where the top two were 18 and 20. And he was unlucky that me and Scott Phipps had a very strong group running. Second season, he gets through as the best wild card. So season 5 gets through as the best wild card. Goes for Norse this time, changes it up. He's still got a bit of bash in him with the Norse, but he does have weaker armor. Um, Phil, you've had I can't remember what your first result was last season, but this season we'll get to your game this season. We won't go
Do we
over
have
it
to?
now.
Do we have to? We can bypass it. We can
No, no,
ignore it completely if
no,
you
no, no,
want.
no, 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 no. We'll get to it. But
What's that? I've got to go.
Look at this as amongst friends. It's a therapy session, so you can.
I'm just grateful there was pizza. That was all.
so
Pizza works wonders.
where it can, you're because you're also trying a new team this season. You haven't brought your elves back. Um, what goes through your mind when you leave that first game and you've lost that first game? You've taken no points away from it. Do you know, because there's got to be a part of you that is wondering what if those elves, or in JD's case those Khorne, were on the pitch.
It depends how different the team plays. I mean, for me, my new corn team, it's a completely different way of playing to an elf team.
Yeah.
Whereas the corn, it's all about bashing with the corn team. You have that frenzy to try and follow up and get another hit in. And but the elves, all I was doing was dodging out, trying to stay away and sort of pass the ball. And for me, it's a completely different way of playing, a learning curve. So to be honest, if I don't know how different Norse is
I think there's a lot of
to
strength. You've got
corn.
you've got less frenzy. You've maybe got less strength 4, but you do have a lot of block in that Norse team. So you do still
It
have
looks
some
very
power.
very defensive, isn't it? So you could line up quite defensively and possibly take hits with that block on people, and then move on. Whereas instead of causing the hits,
Yeah, I mean armor wise,
so
the Norse
if
do
you
have.
endure the game, sort of thing.
Yeah, the Norse do have weaker armor. It's mainly 8s with a few 9s compared to the 9s and 10s. But they are so. I mean, Scott, like I said to you, Norse have a very similar armor to Skaven, but they're much more punchy than Skaven are, who are much more agile. Well, I say much more agile. There is a lot of Ag 3 in that Norse team, so it's it must be disheartening to have your first game loss against the stunty team in the group. But as we've said, JD's season far from over.
And when we come on to the second match, agree. To see JD come back as well into his second match, he's 1-0 down, new team, new ways of learning as well. So I think he's done very well to come back, despite what his comments made against Rats. But that's another story for another day. And yeah,
We will.
again, it sets the league up nicely. It keeps the momentum going, and yeah, it's going to be interesting. So I'm going to be really looking forward to the rematch in terms of how JD plays this on his second match when he does take on Scott and the little fellas next.
I think that's JD's first game in the league against Stunty, so I think he will. I think he did have some games last season against Goblins with his Corn, but yeah, he'll have learned from this absolutely. And the next game we're going to look at is actually his next game, which was a much better result. A 3-1 victory over the Skaven team against the Toxin Runners. 3 casualties for him as well. So taking a bonus point for 1 bonus point for the 3 touchdowns, a bonus point for the 3 casualties. So taking 5 points away from this game. And looking at how this one went, I mean, Scott, we'll stick with you as a Skaven coach. Graham's first game was he lost blitzers, he lost key players in that game to take into this second one. He's taking 3 journeymen into this game compared to JD only taking the 1. And immediately by turn 2, he has got a niggling injury on a lineman, but still, as Skaven can do, still gets a quick touchdown.
Skaven, we all know, as fragile as we are, as much as we can kill ourselves, you can, touchdown left, right, and centre if against a team who aren't aware of that threat. So to see Graham starting well, really great from a Rats perspective, less so from JD's perspective, especially you're on the back of a defeat. You're coming into this match, your second game with your new team, and already you're 1-0 down. So the fact that he kept in there, he's putting the casualties in. Interesting choice from Graham in terms of you're with Skaven, you've gone for 3 gutter runners. You haven't gone from the 4 gutter runners, you've gone for 3. You've left your Roger at home, which can have adverse, effects even if they're on the pitch. So I think it was a really interesting match, and it just proved. I think it proved that without that Roger and that strength 5 player, animal savagery aside, but without that bit of a backbone in there, it just showed that the Norse can be a bit more of a punchy army. Punchy army, too much 40k. That would be too much, a bit more of a punchy team. So as a result of that, I think that's what wore the Skaven down on this occasion. They had injury after injury. Yeah, did they injure or kill the pig? If I remember, they took out.
I'm just scrolling through. We've got
this next game. Okay, so they
this
got
next
the
game
pig.
on a pig.
They got the trophy. But I think JD, played to the strengths of his team. He kept up the pressure. He kept up the casualties. He got good roll of the dice. So bounced back with a win as well. But we know what Skaven can do. So it will be interesting to see what Graham does for his team development.
And it was looking at how this game kind of went on. A Valkyrie, JD lost a Valkyrie to badly hurt, but on turn 6, which it looks like was based on the way the order of things on here, it looks like a Gutter Runner took a Valkyrie out. So that's a very impressive Gutter Runner going for kills there. But manages to keep it going, keep the momentum going. Because the Valkyries are the amount of skills a Valkyrie comes with is so key to that Norse team, because they come with pass and catch and strip ball and dauntless. They can punch. They're one of the quicker players on the team. They can move around. They've got so much benefit to them. You don't need many skills on that Valkyrie in addition to what it comes to create a terrifying player. And we've seen that with John's Norse team. The Iceborne Raiders has got a terrifying Valkyrie in that team that I think has a bounty on its head. So really, really, there's not a lot of progression you need to do. I mean, he's got his win here, so he's got a win from his first 2, which is a great sort of sign for going forward. Like you said, you can get through with 3 losses, so to start with a win from your first 2 games is really solid. Phil, looking at this one, I don't know if you've played JD before or you've sort of seen JD play before. He's gone in and he's punched as many holes in this rat team as he possibly can, which is fantastic. Um, as someone who's also playing a punchy team with maybe less agility than the Norse, are you too surprised that he was able to overpower the rats on this occasion?
Uh, no, good, because the rats have got an awful lot less skills um than his previous opponent, and if you could stop them from moving, he has those two Valkyries, which just about can keep him ahead when going for touchdowns, which is what he did. It was his Valkyries that scored all the touchdowns. So taking the hits or dishing out the hits with his block linemen and everything, getting the ball to that key player, and like I say, all he needed was enough space to stay away from your rats um, for the touchdown, and it worked perfectly.
He's got some good skills there. He's got block on a Valkyrie already, which is going to be really helpful. A Berserker with Dauntless because they are very punchy, the Berserkers. He does have an Ulf Werner that is stat busted for strength from his first game, and not quite the Treasury to replace it, so that's going to be tricky. Looking at the Skaven team going into their next game, they're missing the Thrower, but they do have three Gutter Runners. A Gutter Runner with Strip Ball, I think, could be an interesting one, and a Gutter Runner with Dodge and Block. I mean, I can tell you from last season, Scott, I'm sure you can say a blodging Gutter Runner is an absolute godsend.
Block is your first skill upgrade for any gutter runner, no matter what you want to go with them, in the future. Whether you want to put sprint on them, whether you want to put strip ball on them, which is always good if you want to go hunting in the middle of a cage. Block is like bread and butter for that skill upgrade for Skaven.
Sadly, Block. I think last season I got Block on a couple of them, but Danny LaSquish wasn't one of them, which may be why he's doing the rounds at the minute. So,
You need to let it go, Chris. You need to let it go.
I,
See
I
there.
I try, but I close my eyes and I see his face, and I don't know what to do.
As I understand it, having that block and dodge combo seems to be the thing if you're planning on sort of running the ball.
Absolutely.
Because
I mean, if you've got block and dodge, you can only be knocked down on a POW. And
Yeah.
it just
yeah,
reduces, it just immediately cuts down how often you're going to get knocked down, which is when you've got it, it's amazing. When you're facing it, you're so angry every time you get a stumble. Unless you've got a skill that counters it, it's just it's fantastic. And gutter runners are great ones to have it on because they are your scoring threat in that Skaven team. Um, we'll move on to the next game, and myself and
do we have
Scott,
to?
we do. Myself and Scott are just going to casually lean back in our chairs, and and look
This lovely
before we
early
start.
Christmas
Look before we start. Okay, I had as many some people watching and many people in the league will know. Before the league started, I had a tournament, the Subterranean tournament, which our very own Justin ran fantastically, um, where I took my humans and I lost my first game 7-2 to Wood Elves. I was absolutely annihilated because things just I couldn't have bought a dice roll in the first half to successfully do anything. I've been on the end of defeats that you hear the result of and you go, oh god damn it. Um, this one is like fascinating because it's dwarves. Now we know Elliot is very good with dwarves. We know that he got to the final last year. He's done amazing in tournaments with them. Elliot is very very good with this team. How did we get to 6-0, Phil? Just how did we get there?
Phil,
Fail
you're
it.
my friend. You can swear as much as you like.
There's no
It was just
filter on this. You go nuts.
it was basically failing or only getting a push on things. I wasn't doing any damage, and which is what I kind of wanted to do. I tried going for damage. That was my primary sort of goal, and then possibly score, which never happened. But I was only getting the pushes, and when I was getting something that I could knock a player down, oh, he's got block. Oh, he's got, and I could never have the advantage either because all his sort of main guys with guard were on the front line in the way. So I was always against guard. So I had to pick my opponent I was going after very carefully to try and make sure it wasn't an uphill dice roll. And I wasn't getting anything. And when I did get something, I wasn't doing the damage. I wasn't breaking through the armor. I was just putting them on the floor, giving them a little tickle, and they were standing up again.
Look,
And in the meanwhile, he was able to push me to one side and could get the gap to come through. And I always needed that extra couple of rushes if I wanted to try and tackle that ball carrier, of which I then failed again on that second rush. And
looking at his lineup, there are 3 skills he has not randomized. So the 3 that he's chosen, he's given a block to a runner, block to another runner, and guard to a troll slayer. As far as the skills that he has randomized, grab, guard, mighty blow, guard, mighty blow, brawler, mighty blow, guard, mighty blow, sidestep. It's incredible. It's unbelievable. He's had such an amazing run with all of those skills. And sometimes you get it, because I've had seasons where I've got it and I've randomized skinks and I've only ever got sidestep and catch and I've been in absolute heaven. And sometimes you don't. And he's got there's just so much skill there to get through. I think any team is going to have a real. I think he's comfortably got one of the strongest rosters.
I did a little bit of damage. I made 2 players miss the next game, didn't I? I think possibly.
Yeah.
But I didn't really help his next victim out, did I?
True, right. But you've got the finest looking end zone in the league. It takes something away from that, Phil.
Well, if that gets me something, I'll be all right then.
It will get you something if me and Scott decide that it gets you something. So we'll have a think. I think best end zone probably has to be an award. We've not done it the last 2. We probably should do it. I mean, looking at your roster after that game, Phil, you've lost a couple of linemen and 1 Corngor, and you had 1 Bloodseeker out as well.
Dead.
And
Gone.
you don't. So Corn, quite expensive to replace. How are you? But your team value is quite a lot lower because you don't have the expensive Corngor. Well, the semi-expensive Corngor. You don't have the expensive Bloodseeker. So, How are you thinking? Are you thinking you're going to have to change the way maybe you've prepared to play for this team in your next game, or like what are you thinking for your next game?
Survive.
I mean,
like I say, I can't buy any new players, so it's 3 or 4 journeymen that I've got to go in with, and try and make sure it's not 6 this next time. Limit it to 5, perhaps. And if I can maybe gain some XP or SP by doing something else to try and boost the team a bit up, so I look maybe a further game ahead. Say, just survive the next one, and then look to the one afterwards where I possibly can buy a player back.
Scott,
the long game. So
Scott,
yeah.
I mean, what are you taking away from this one?
I said when we did the predictions with obviously Tom getting back safely from Reading. When we talked about this, I did ask the question. Elliot has such an amazing season getting to the final last in season 5. I asked the question, would his bubble burst? No, is the answer. What do I know about Bloodbowl anyway? So, and the fact that he scored 30, 3-0 SPP in the match. As you said, Phil, if you're just getting the pushes and when they're on the floor, if you're not absolutely pounding them into the dust and, sending them off to the KO, it's one of those really frustrating days. Phil, I think it's there for you. I played Acorn the Squirrel myself on the weekend, which we'll come on to talk about. 80k. When he works very nicely and he's entertaining. There's options in terms of there. It's that classic second match of the season. You're only starting with 11, maybe 12 if you're lucky. Where do you go with injuries? You've got to go in for the journeyman to come in. So I do feel for you on that. But I think Elliot has continued his luck hasn't burst. He's really take it while you can, Elliot, and run with it. That's what I say. He's got some great skills in terms of upgrades, and he proved it when he faced Robert then in his second match, as we'll come on to.
We've got Scott in the Hot Spew. Scott in the chat says, "Watch this game. Elliot probably favourite going into it, but Phil just failed so many dice that Elliot didn't, and Elliot didn't at the crucial moments, and that's what probably swung it. Well done to Elliot. He is playing. He's very very strong with this team, and what I would say to everyone in this group, bar Elliot, and Robert in particular will kind of know what I mean by this. Last season, last season I had Robert in my group who was in a similar position to Elliot with this amazing roster, very very strong team, and absolutely the one in the group you were terrified by, and I went into the season thinking that every game against Robert was damage limitation, and that's not where my points would come to get me out of the group, and I had to play completely differently in those games than I did against the Dark Elves or than I did against the Underworld. So you know it's always tricky to do because it's tricky to go into a game with the mindset that winning isn't, I don't care if I win, I want to survive. So you play a very different kind of game when you do that, but actually, because you're maybe not going on the offensive as much and you're being a bit more defensive, especially against a slow team like these dwarves, it might give you just enough of a buffer to, if not cause an upset, just get out of it with the players you need. So yes, my guidance, having been in a group with a terrifying person last season, is run away from Elliot and focus on everyone else.
Just if
Will,
I can, then,
yeah.
just to put the metaphorical arm around Phil's shoulders as well. If you remember Phil as well, last season, Mr. Coe here pasted Simon 5-2. He used his Skaven and it was a 5-2. And then all of a sudden, Simon's in the semi-final. Chris is at home weeping. So that's just a reminder how things can change.
There's me thinking you're going to say then Simon beat me 3-1 later in the season, and you go for he's in the semi-final and I'm crying at home. Well, I mean, you're not wrong, but it's still.
We're amongst friends. You've got to say it as it is, Chris. And I know, this is therapy as much as this talking Blood Bowl.
I was just grateful there was pizza. Pizza solves all issues.
Yeah, another shout out to Woodyard Pizza for bringing pizza along for our games on the Friday night again. So a huge thank you to them for their ongoing support.
If there's 6 again, I might need some alcohol as well.
We'll go on to the next game. We'll go on to World's Edge Berserkers. We've got more dwarves versus the goblins. And versus the Flumps, who again, after a good result against the Norse team, come in for and both Goblin coaches were a bit skeptical coming into the season, being in a group with a Dwarven team. Scott, they've Flumps again have put in a good show and shown that they're not gonna roll over to some blocky dwarves.
I think it's harsh as well talking to Phil about this one. I mean, this is where you've got injured dwarfs coming through. The amount of fouls coming through from the little fellas, it was, really, really good to watch again. And it was a good back and forth match. It goes to the strengths that we talked about a few minutes ago. The fact that when Scott is playing this, he's not playing it as you think. He is actively, taking the little fellas and targeting the opposition. And that's really good to see as well. So the fact that, the World Edge Berserkers got a draw out of this, it could have gone either way, really, up until the end as well. So good match.
You've got, I think, one of our first uses of a merc in this one, Stunty Superstar, coming in from one of our mercs that we've built. Injuries on both sides, trading casualties a little bit. Phil, you've got dwarves and goblins in your group, so what can you kind of take away from this to kind of help you? I know you've got different dwarves and different goblins, but you've got two teams here that you're going to face. So how are you looking at this?
Um. Oh. Well, like I said, they're different teams, and depends if the coaches play that much differently from each other. Because I watched this game because this was being next or the table next to me, and I managed to watch part of this game, and you could see Scott targeting players. You could see him moving around, specifically going after certain players on the pitch. And I say that's if that's done against me and my good players are gone. It's like, well, how do I try and combat that? I've got to keep my players together, not have them isolated, so one can't be targeted. But that's not to say that whoever's got, I don't know who's got goblins in my group.
Robert. Robert's got
Robert.
goblins in
So
the group.
I said, no idea how Robert plays. Whether he'll try and do the same, like target specific people, or whether he'll do something completely different. But like I say, if I was playing against Scott, based on the way he was playing in this game, targeting specific players, I'd want to keep my players grouped together so they're not on their own, so they can't sort of be ganged up on.
I think it's interesting because you've got dodge versus block here, haven't you? Because you've got a lot of block on one team, you've got a lot of dodge on the other, and it's so the kind of benefits that your players get for on rolling a dice and how more often you're going to knock them down or how less often because of the skills you've got because of the skills they've got is completely cancelled out. The thing that the dwarves have here is generally they have the strength, but the flumps went into this game with Fungus the Loon comes in to the game. They've got in the squad anyway. They've got the like Loony, Fanatic, all of the secret weapons and things like that as well. Really, really strong. We've got Scott in the chat saying that Papa Skullbones turns my lineman into a stunty hack phlegm, which sounds, quite frankly, sounds terrifying. So, Scott, did you? I mean, this is the third Flumps game that they've played. So they've played 3 games. One of only a few teams who have played 3 games so far. They're looking this game in particular, I think, because I was like, all right, they beat the Skaven low armor, got a draw there, great. Norse got a great result there. They've then got a draw in this game. They're on 9 points in this group. Now, 9 points didn't get you wild card last year, but 12 points did, and they only need 3 points from 3 games with the amount of casualties, because they've got 3 casualties in every game so far. This is looking like flump season to qualify.
I don't want to say I told you so, but if you do want to go back and watch the predictions on the pre-season, I think I did say this one. As much as this is our second team for all coaches in the league. We all wanted the little guys to come out of this one. You're absolutely right, though. The amount of casualties he's getting. If you look at the last 4 results, because he drew against the Reptile Dysfunction and just missed out in terms of taking these guys through to knockout stage season 6. So it's undefeated in 4 now. Apologies if I've got that wrong.
No, that is right. Yeah.
He's undefeated in 4. We know he's going to go that tactic of getting people. So if he's going to get the casualties for each match, there's another 3. You're up to 12. That's a guarantee. Well, I wouldn't say guaranteed, but it's a really good standing for that wildcard playoff as well. Plus, Graham has still to play JD again. JD still to play Jamie again. So all 3 of them know, what this little guy's team can do. Are they going to do anything different about it? That's the good question. So I think it's up there for Scott to win. I really do.
It's undefeated in 4. It's actually only one loss in 7. So the last 7 games, he's only lost one. Draws and wins coming in the other fixtures. So really, Scott loves these goblins, and he's really, really nailing them as well. Um, on Jamie, we'll just talk about Jamie's dwarves here. There are sort of a number of skills in that team. He's got a couple of armbar, juggernaut in there on a couple of players. Strand Firm, Mighty Blow, not quite as skilled up as the other one, as the other dwarf team that we've got. Redrafted from last season. It's his third season playing with dwarves. So Jamie is an interesting one because he's got some skills there, but maybe not as many as some of the other teams that have redrafted and come through. Um, but and Phil, I know you weren't in previous seasons. Um, how would you look at playing someone like Jamie, who has he has improved season on season, still possibly looks a bit like an underdog? How would you prepare for a game against someone who, while they may not, they've not got out of the group stage yet, but they are clearly growing each year and clearly know how the team works?
I'd say when I'm coming across people, because it is all still a learning experience for me. There are some teams out there I've not played against. I've only played with a few teams. And learning one specific team and getting really good with them must bring you a bit of confidence when playing games, because you can learn exactly roughly what's going to happen, bar any sort of extreme dice rolls that go against you. And I say everyone I'm playing against has probably got more experience than I have. So I see every game as a learning curve in a way, because they're all going to be different.
Yeah.
As,
Comment from Scott in the chat is that Jamie just in this game just couldn't break armor, and played really well, but just couldn't keep a goblin on the floor, which is always tricky when you're knocking them down, but you're not getting through the armor.
Yeah.
It can get demoralizing the further you go into the game.
What I'd say about this team, though, for Jamie, he's got some really good core skills there. You've mentioned Juggernaut, Mighty Blow, Stand Firm as well. I know he's down to 8 players for next time. I don't know who he's playing in the next fixtures. He beat Scott and the Flumps last year. He's just come away with a draw, so he knows how to play them if they play him at all. If I was Graham looking at this in my next fixture, I'd be doing a typical Skaven run away, without doubt as well. You don't want to get up close and personal with these dwarves, especially. So it's going to be really interesting for Jamie. Who does he play next? How's that going to really impact it? But he's proved last year he can do a job with them, so he can mix it with the best. So I think it'll be a really, really good one for his next match.
I think it's still a very. I think the fact that the goblins are at the top, and this isn't to take anything away from the goblins because they've been spectacular, but it shows how close this group is going to be because you've got, your stunty team are sat at the top there, looking pretty comfortable, looking pretty good to qualify. The scramble for possibly a wild card to come from this group, or even just for your second place, is going to be really fun to watch. So it's a really good one to keep an eye on. We'll go to the next game. Before we do, we've got 9 people watching at the minute. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it is probably as more. It's a good number. I'm pretty happy with it. So if you're watching, say hi in the chat. Chip in if you've got an opinion on one of the games. We'd love to hear from you. The next game we're going to go to is my game of the week. So as I did last week, where I just put Tom on the spot. Scott, I'm just going to put you on the spot. I'm gonna shut up and I'm gonna let you ask me questions about this game.
So, well, you didn't have your pink dice, so I'm assuming you cheated. Uh, let's just put that out there. No, 3-0. You've got your 6 points. 16 SPP, no death, 2 injuries against, which is nice. And I believe you had a couple of journeymen in there as well, Chris.
I did, and I thought um, it's quite. There's something quite nice about having skink journeymen because I didn't care if they were murdered. Um, I just didn't care at all if they were killed, which was really refreshing because if I needed an assist, if Asaurus needed an assist on one of the Strength 4 or the Strength 5 guys, I could just chuck a Journeyman in there and just be like, if they get punched next turn, I'm not gonna miss them.
And you,
When they started to get SPP, I did start to miss them, and I did start to take more care. But initially, it was refreshing.
and there seemed to be a disproportionate amount of ungentlemanly conduct in that first half as well. A lot of fouling going on. What were your thoughts on that? Was it trying to get into the Orcs straight away? Bit of mind games?
So when you look at the fouls, a lot of them come from Luis Mendoza, who was one of my journeymen, who I chose to sign after the game. So I did try as much as I could. I tried to only foul with the journeyman because I was like they're disposable. If they go off the pitch, I'm not losing SPP. That's fine. Um, and so yeah, my first foul was with I think that particular journeyman I think did almost all of my fouls bar one, because I wanted I wanted orcs off the pitch. I wanted to have the player advantage, so I sent the journeyman in to do the job, and he did a good enough job for me to hire him afterwards. So it worked out well.
And what about your next developments, Chris? Because you've got on your skills, you've got leap on 2 of your skinks, you've got jump up on 2 of your skinks, which with a movement 8 is a bit terrifying. It almost feels
It's
like
beautiful, Scott. It's
you
absolutely
haven't let the
beautiful.
you just haven't let the rats go properly, have you? You're just carrying that movement 9 with you wherever you want to as well. The question as well is, are we going to see the Crocs? When are we going to see the Crocs? Is there a risk you're going to bring him on too late this season?
um, I I see this season as preparing for next season. I don't think. I think there's plenty of coaches and plenty of teams out there stronger than I am, and I will be happy to get through. I'd be happy to get through the group. I'd love to get through the group. I'd love to get maybe to the quarterfinals again. Um, but I'm very much this season. I'm gonna as best I can. I'm just uh, gonna see what the team grows into. Um, and I've just seen in the chat Scott mentioned leap on those skinks, which does hurt a little bit to have randomized leap on 2 skinks. Leap is fantastic when you're not stunty. When you're stunty and you dodge anywhere everywhere without taking into account negative like tackle zones, leap is an absolute waste of time. And I sat there for a good 10, 15 minutes, maybe longer, arguing with Scott, trying desperately to find where is the benefit in leap on a stunty skink? Where does it come in helpful? And it means that I maybe one time I could roll 1 dice rather than 2, but it's a 4 rather than a 3, and I don't have a built-in reroll. So that's it. That's it. So I'm not happy with that. But yeah, I'm going to see what this team looks like at the end of the season, and then I'm absolutely redrafting. I'm committing now. For these ducks are going to be with me for a while because I absolutely adore them, and we're just gonna see what next season looks like. So I'm just gonna see what I can build.
Excellent stuff. And
So
what would you say to Daryl and his orcs in terms of what a wonderful world? How would you see it? What was it like for Daryl? Coming into the season.
Daryl rolled two pals all game. He was pushing me around the pitch, or he was getting both down. He just didn't have, and he didn't have the armor breaks either. Um, he didn't get many SPP in his first game. He didn't get many SPP out of this game either. And it is large. And I spoke to Dave, who he played in his first game, and he just hasn't had the dice rolls. He's just really struggled to get what he needs to, because he caged up really well. He caged up really strongly, um, and there weren't many opportunities to break in. I sort of managed to get sort of gaps in order to go into blitz to get the ball, and that was only because he was failing something which was ending his turn. Um, you know, he admits himself. He says himself that he normally plays Skaven. He's used to a more agile team. He doesn't play slow teams very often. I think part of him wishes he played brought Skaven to the league, and it's a new team for him, and he's just not getting the dice rolls to back up the things that he's doing, which for him is painful to play through, and for me just left some gaps open to do something with.
I was just going to ask, 3 games played, 8 points, currently top of your group. Going through as top?
No. No.
No?
Dave's Lizards are exceptional. They're a really, really strong team. I'll happily go through a second. I don't mind going through. I'll more than happy go through a second, because I also think that had Daryl had the dice, this would have been a lot closer. I think Andy's shambling undead with those mummies can cause some real damage, and I don't think I haven't got 3 easy games left. I've got 3 tough games. And last season I was in a similar position after 3 games, and I lost 2 in a row when it came down to the last match. So I'm not sort of counting on anything at all. I still think Dave is a surefire first place in this group, and I'll do everything I can to get second. What I do want to shout out is the inducement, the Wag drummer. Absolutely amazing inducement that I wish I could take. If you've got the option to take the drummer, so good that you can possibly move 3 players on your line out of it. If you're faced up against a line full of guard and you can just push them back a space, immediately it makes your first turn amazing. So he used that really well. And even tried to use it, because I didn't realize that you could select any player on the pitch to move back, and I lined up all of my skinks nice and safely at the back. Had he rolled 3 4+ on his dice rolls, he could have just picked one of my skinks and pushed them immediately into the crowd on kickoff to be beaten up by the crowd, which I did not realize, and I was very scared and very lucky it didn't come off. So yeah, I'd like to shout that out, because it's really good inducement. Any other questions from you two on this one? Otherwise I will move on, because I hate talking about my own games.
You're too modest as well, Chris. So, no.
We'll jump on. We'll jump through, and we'll go through to now. I've got to behave myself. I've got to behave myself. I've promised Harrison that I will only start hyping him up if he gets to the final. But we go through to Harrison's Orcs versus Andy's Biting Bats. And Phil, we'll start with you. You played Harrison last season. Harrison had he won't mind me saying this, had an absolute shocker last season. I'm sure he will agree that he had an absolute shocker last season. He was in the chat. I think he's still here. There he is. Yeah, Harrison's joined us. Hi, Harrison. Thanks for joining.
He probably likes me. His draw against me was his only point.
Well, there we are. Not the best season. Has come back with a orc team. He's come back with strength rather than agility. And in the first game against vampires, which are probably a bit unpredictable because they are sort of newly back in the frame, so they're a bit unpredictable for everyone. And he's come in and he's got a good result and some good points.
Yeah, I mean, Vampires, I think, possibly a tricky team to play. And 'cause I played a couple of friendlies before the season started, and you're always having to think about that bloodlust. And if your opponent can play, against that, can work that against you, then you can have probably a fairly good, decent game against a vampire team. So, uh, having a look now of what went on, he caused a couple of casualties, mainly to the throwers by the looks of it. Um,
Either way, I know, I don't want to put the mockers on Harrison, but he's had a phenomenal start to the season. And this particular, I was playing next door to these guys. New team for Andy, but as he conceded, Harrison played some very good Blood Bowl, blocked him up, didn't let him play to the strength, particularly in terms of bloodlust. And yeah, even Andy, kudos to Andy and shout out. He said Harrison deserved it in terms of that 1-0 win. So it was a very good match.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep my mouth shut because
No, don't Chris.
I do feel, I do feel like I properly jinxed him last season. It was a really good performance. It was really good. Andy, of all of the people taking vampires this season, Andy has taken the most vampires. I think he's taken the full amount of vampires he can, compared to most other teams, including our very own Tom, who's only taken 4. So went in a lot heavier with the vampires and with that strength. Um,
Yeah.
and it doesn't look like it has hindered him too badly because I think I don't think in the games that I've played people as vampires, bloodlust has just suddenly ruined the game. I think it did. I don't think it was quite that bad. And from Andy's point of view as well, Andy was in my group last season, and Andy only had one game last season in the group stage where he didn't concede 3 touchdowns. Andy's coming out of this game with 3 casualties. He may be coming out with a loss, but he's coming out with a point. He's coming out with 3 casualties. His team is he's got 1 vampire down, but otherwise he's got 5 vampires going to the next game. Compared to last season where he was annihilated in game 1 and pitch cleared, he is looking pretty good. He's looking in a much better position to continue his season compared to last season.
Yeah, I think for this league as well, for these guys, it's early days in this division as well. And I know Justin's going to have I don't want to put again the mockers on Justin as much as Harrison. Um, but, I think there's an incredible amount to play for. And now, as we'll come on to the next few results, we'll see in this division as well. Harrison has really upset everybody in terms of the results. So, as much as if Chris put the mockers on you and jinx you last season, Harrison, if I put the jinx on you this season, I can only apologise beforehand.
In the just quickly in the chat, sorry Phil, I'll come to you in a second. Quickly in the chat, Flumps coach Scott has said if I retire the Flumps, then there's the possibility of a pure thrall vampire team. I'm going to go on record now and say that would be stupid, but I've never played vampires. Who knows? It might be a hidden genius move. Sorry Phil, what were you going to say?
I'll just say I don't know how expert Harrison is, but he's sort of done the same thing as me. He's traded in a very, he was elves as well, and he's traded in for a very strong bashy team. With I think he's got nearly armor 10 on everything, hasn't he?
There's a lot of strong armor. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, a complete opposite to what he had, and obviously he's doing a better job than me, playing a more bashy team. But I can only, and if he played that well, in his first game and deserved the win, then he's obviously found a team he likes straight away and could, probably go far with, because obviously he was very unlucky with the elves. I mean, I know the game where he drew against me, we were both rolling ones, or both downs or skulls. And when you're in an elf team, that's just you wonder why you're even playing when you're always rolling a one. You wonder if there's any other sides to a dice. And you would have thought that sort of luck, when you're only rolling those lower numbers, would be even worse for a less agile team. Because what was his agility on his 3 and 4? So you need the best of dice rolls regarding doing any sort of dodges or throws or passes or catches or anything like that. If you try that, but obviously the dice rolls went with him, and he was able to play it very well.
We'll go on to Harrison's next game in a second. Harrison in the chat mentioning that the elf shenanigans in that game that you guys played just never happened for either of you. So
No,
um,
all that elf bullshit that Scott kept talking about before I started that first season didn't happen. Constantly told, oh, elves get away with everything. They can move here, do that. Not a problem.
your
No.
elves just didn't seem to
No,
get the message, it seemed. We'll go on to the next game. We'll come back to Harrison for our last game that we're going to look at. But we will go on to Scott. It is your game, Word Hollow Wanderers versus your very own Gentleman's Collective. I
Say the
guess
full name, Chris. Say the full
Come on,
name.
Chris, we need somebody.
Say the full name.
the Skaven Spank Me Hardy, the Gentleman's Collective.
Beautiful.
Uh, I mean, I'll hand over to you. Actually, it's an interesting lineup because Simon. I was in Simon's group last season. Obviously, less skills on his team that time. So Simon, going into this game, will have known and played against Skaven before. Granted, not against another. I didn't have a Rat Ogre at that point, so not against a Rat Ogre. But yeah, how did this game kind of move on with lots of you both had gutter runners. How did it kind of get to this point?
It it felt like the first game when you haven't done enough pre-season. From my perspective, Simon played well as well. If you look at the timestamp, it ended up playing more than 4.5 hours, and I'll come on to the ending of it shortly. But when you might think, well, 4.5 hours, good God, is that a cure for insomnia or what? It wasn't actually. It was a lot. A lot really happened in terms of that. First of all, turn one, we got some good old Roger on Roger action for all you dirty rat lovers out there, especially you, JD. So Archbishop of Canterbury stormed in, took out, despite the APOC's best efforts, took out the Skaven Blitzer, who is one of the key players of the underworld. Then the mutant rat ogre, I would mispronounce his name, Slacked Rots, he came in and took out the Archbishop of Canterbury for the rest of the game, and not having a Rogo was a bit of a challenge there as well, but scored an initial touchdown, did well. And then it went for a bit. I have to say, the Snotlings are such a bloody frustrating thing, very similar to Phil on his. You're getting the knockdowns, you're getting the armors, but you're just not getting anything more than a stun on a stunty, which is so frustrating. So that kept on going as well. Had a couple of injuries from fouls coming through. We had a point where everybody's favorite gutter runner from the underworld with the sausage roll bounty on his head, Snoot Skitter, he's got his movement of 12. So his base 9 plus he's got sprint. He actually had there was a turnover, and I think it was roughly about turn 5. He had the opportunity, he was going for it, he did a couple of nice dodges, but Nuffle's tripwire caught him. He rolled the double one, and he absolutely gave it up. I tried to cage up, didn't get away with it. The goblin, I think it was the goblin, came in, dodged into the cage, one dice block on a gutter runner who had the ball bounced straight back into the goblin. He jumped out, and then old Scooch was there to go it in. So it did take a long time, but we were getting through it in terms of that. I had Acorn the Squirrel for 80k, very entertaining, very good.
Yes. Tell me about your experience with Acorn, because I love Acorn.
So
I think Acorn can cause such chaos and is so much fun. How did
for
you find
80,
him?
I loved him. I've actually got him. I've got my own replica now to paint up, ready for my next match for him. For what he's worth, okay, can't pick up the ball. If you want a missile to go in and have a go, he actually, towards the end of the match, he actually did. You like this, just for you, Chris. He went to blitz the Rat Ogre. So he got strength 1 with Juggernaut against a strength 5 Rat Ogre. He went in, he failed the Dauntless. He had a 3 dice uphill. He had a he had a 2 stumbles and a pow. So what more do you want from that? So, and the only thing, he missed out on the armor of the rogue by 1, I think it was. So it got to that. We had some technical issues. Just want to
Yeah,
put that out there. So we had a few technical issues. We had technical issues with the sound. We had technical issues in terms of I forgot to put as much time on the car, and knowing Woodbridge traffic wardens, who are very zealous and very efficient in their jobs, had to nip out very, very quickly. And we did get to a point whereby it was going back and forth. The ball was going all over the place, and we got sorted to just under 5 hours, and unfortunately we called it because it was we were up against the clock and some out of office requirements as well. Shout out at this point and big hugs and loves to Simon. He epitomized what is good about our community. We talked it through in terms of going for the draw. I had just gone in and I was ready to do a 2 dice block with my blitzer on his star. Um, Skaven gutter runner, Snooch Skitter who had the ball, but we did call it as well. Unfortunately, we couldn't finish that off yesterday on the Sunday, so looking forward to the next rematch as well. So it was a very good game from Simon, very good, entertaining. It did take a long time, but it was worth it. Good quality time, good company.
Phil, I'm going to ask you this question, and then I'm going to run to the loo because I'm absolutely bursting to go to the loo. But so I'm going to ask you this first. So you haven't, you have played against Skaven as your elves, because we played a friendly game, which I think ended
Yeah.
up as 4-4. Um,
Yep.
so you have played against Skaven. The Snotlings are much more easy to put. Strength 1, but they have dodge and you can push. Sidestep. They push them around and stuff. You've got two very agile teams here, and the only difference in the strength is the Rat Ogres, which they both have. So on paper, the Skaven team probably has more ability to do 2 dice, 3 dice blocks than the Underworld team. Do you think that, from someone who maybe hasn't played much against either of these teams before, just looking on paper and maybe ignoring some of the skills that you've got there, do you think this is a do you think a draw is maybe what is somewhat expected solely based on the lineups? I'm now going to leave you with that question, and I will be back shortly.
Um. Well, a draw is what I got when I played the Wanderers in a friendly before the season started, and I was probably taking more risky roles and chances there. The one thing that I had to try and cope with was swarming.
Yeah.
Suddenly, all of a sudden, you're surrounded by all these little, which all adds to support when trying to block and attack other people, and they were really annoying. And trying to get rid of them, which I was lucky. It was probably a deceptive game for me because I did manage to get rid of them in my game. But if you can't get rid of them, it does make some, blocks, some movement, some of the things that you want to do very difficult.
Yeah, similar to what you said, Phil, with your match, and we talked about it a couple of times as well. We talked about it with Daryl and his orcs. when you're having one of those matches when you are just in effect, if you can't, you end up almost pushing them around the pitch. And with the Snotleys, it is with swarming very, very frustrating as well. The decision I went to was go for it in terms of, trying to take out the linesman, because then at least with one, Skaven linesman on another Skaven linesman, okay, it's only a one dice block, but at least it's a block and it feels more satisfying when something happens. The one thing we had as well, I had a couple of players sent off. We had a very unhappy referee who, didn't like being argued with. So my random was the blitzer who got sent off. I believe Simon's random was again Scooch Snitter, the old gutter runner, who didn't get sent off on the ref's call as well. And then I decided to go for it with a couple extras, which didn't end up. So it felt for me very much like that first match, in terms of you still feel a bit rusty, you're still feeling a bit, again, if you haven't put the hours in terms of getting your friendlies in. For me, this team is about longer term development. Last year, it was all about the random skills and learning the game. This year, it's about I know the path. I want to make the team for the players. Yes, get out of the group if I can. And then really looking at on this Friday, we're talking about a few upcoming fixtures early. We've got Tom and his vampires, 4 vampires, not the 5 Andy was rolling, 4 vampires. No Roger, who's out, but at least I've got 3 gutter runners and 2 blitzers, and I have upgraded with an APOC coming in, which I didn't have with me for this match as well. So, yeah, a few journeymen coming in there. It should be a very interesting match, what we can do for a lot of strength 3 on strength 3.
So before we go on to the next game, just a question for you, Scott, then, because I
Yeah.
played pretty much all of last season without a Rat Ogre, and then took one at the very end, and it. We'll move on. For you've had a Rat Ogre more often. How do you? I can't remember whether you started last season with the Rat Ogre as well. How do you prepare then for not having that strength 5 in your team and only having strength 3 or below? Because you'll be so used to that strength. Do you have to change much, or is it kind of a simple change?
For me, this will be my first match without a Roger. I am of the in the Roger clan. Against, I think whether I was playing Roger or not Roger, I prefer against the vampires. I think it's got to be a different mindset as compared to the Weird Hollow Wanderers as well. Plus, as well, thinking about Khorne coming up with Harry and his chosen against the blood, against, will the bloodlust come through? Is it going to be a case of if I cage her, yeah, they're just going to walk through it? Is it going to be a bit more screening? Yeah, probably. We're going to have to see how that goes. Making sure we've got it. We know the Skaven can score well. If we can have a little play in terms of maybe getting Skaven the gutter run and maybe putting them at risk with an extra +1 for an assist, you might get a few 2 blocks against the thralls, but it's going to have to be a very, very. It's not going to be a question of caging up and going for it. I think you have to play this one a little bit more sensible. But then I've got Skaven, I've got linesmen. Yeah, we can get some more. That's all right. They die.
Would you say the 1-1 draw was a fair result because you called it early, or because there's a lot of skills and it's obviously a redrafted team?
Yeah, before the match, if you'd have said a 1-1 draw, I'd have said, yeah, not really. But I think given the way the match was going, given the fact that we were running up to a deadline as well, I'll take the 1-1 draw. Kudos again to Simon and the big thanks for that, for the support. I'll take the 1-1 draw. This time last year, I'd lost my first match and my third match to the Hot Spews. So again, I went lost, win, lost in my first 3, and then I won the last 3. So all of those players we've talked about tonight, Phil, the 2 of us, we've talked about Jane. Haven't mentioned Tom at all, but there you go, because he's on the way home. Safe driving there, Tom. And it just says it's still very much at this stage, it's open to everybody. If you've lost the first 1, you've drawn, you've lost the first 2. it's still very open, and we know this can change a lot very quickly. Unless you're Elliot, and then you're just it's all up against the moment. Looking on big.
it's a very close looking group, and we'll look at the groups at the end. We'll fly through them all, but it's a very close looking group at the
Yeah,
moment with yours. So I think there's still your group could be very, very tight as to who gets out of there, which I think is going to be really, really fun to watch. So yeah, I look forward to seeing how that goes on. Speaking of Elliot, we'll go on to Elliot's next game, which is we've got one more game after this. And we've got the Numpties beating we've got Dwarfs against Goblins again, and we've got a 3-0 result for the Numpties against Robert's Kraken Skull Cannoneers. And again, sort of very early on this one, as Tourplay started to update us onto what was going on, even though a journeyman was taken by the Numpties, immediately we get casualty, niggling injury, casualty miss next game. Straight away off the bat, we get 4 casualties followed by a touchdown on turn 7. Um, it, I mean, Phil, you are very familiar with Elliot at this point, and he's
Wish I
got
wasn't.
and he's got got Robert up against him. I know that Robert has come into this season with the Goblins to sort of sort of maybe take things a bit less seriously, have a bit more fun with a team that can throw bombs and do shenanigans and all of this stuff, which I think is a great way to come into it with that mindset. I mean, what do you look at this? I guess from your perspective, you're looking at a team that has just had its way with you and a team that you have got to play. So are you looking at this as were you kind of hoping that Elliot's run continued so that you had an easier draw against Robert?
After this result, I hope his run continues, because the more he can bash and take out the others in my set in my league, the better chance I've got. If Elliot was to have lost this, I'd be kicking myself. It's like how did I let him get 6 and do that much damage to me? But because he's gone and done it again and gained another 27
Yeah.
SP,
yeah.
means it wasn't a fluke. You don't do that twice in a row without playing very well and knowing what you're doing. So I just hope that there's enough damage done for when I come across Robert that it's a fairly even game, or I have an easier time of it.
Scott, 57 SPP in 2 games is phenomenal, right?
You can, it's a ridiculous number. It's too good, Elliot. Come on, give us all a chance here. But the fact that, as Phil said, it'd be interesting. I'm going to ask Phil after this as well how he's looking at Robert's, team for the Goblins. But to play that team and to play a lot of dodge, a lot of stunty as well, yeah, the result says it all. It's another 6 points. Thank you very much indeed. I know Robert's got 2 trolls there to go as well. So, what are your plans then, Phil, in terms of when you look at this Goblin lineup?
There's a lot of skills there. There's a lot of skills, and again, a lot of dodge. And I'm gonna have to try, based on a lot of dodge. My first instinct is to try and not let them have space. Try and keep on them as much as possible to try and force those dodge rolls to get away. That's my first instinct. First thing I see. It's obviously a team that likes to move if you've got that much dodge, and
Yeah.
if I can stop that, I'll probably try and stop the team playing well. If I can't stop that dodging, then it's going to be difficult. I'm going to have to try and cause as much damage as possible early on.
I think with both you and with Robert, with your first games, I think it's really difficult to judge how either of your seasons is going to keep going because of what we know Elliot can do. because what we know he can do there. And I think I I know from a few different seasons now and a few different teams. I played Robert in season 3. I had him I had him in my group then. Season 5, I had him in my group then. Season 4, I played him in the playoffs. I've played Robert a number of times. I love playing Robert. He's one of my favorite coaches to play against. I absolutely love playing against him. It's so much fun, and he can adapt and do things differently and know what to do. And I'm really interested. I would love to see him play this Goblin team and how he kind of. I want to see him really in a groove with this Goblin team, because I think with the projectile vomiting, with the throwing teammates, with the chainsaws, the bombardiers, I can see him being really entertaining to watch, a bit like the Flumps, but in a different way. I can see there being lots of kind of let's try this and all this sort of stuff, and I think it's going to be really really fun to see
That's
what
also a
he
lot of
does.
stuff. That's a lot of stuff I've not come across yet either. I've not played against teams that can throw teammates or have weapons. No, I've not come across that at all. So no idea what to expect or regarding that.
All I'd say is, having played Chris and the halflings last year, who, when they're just throwing halflings and, when stunties get thrown all over the place, yeah, don't put all your players up on the line. There's a little as well. Because they will do a throw, one of them will stick and one of them will land, and then it'll be dodge, 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 rush, rush, dodge, dodge, dodge. What would Chris Co do? Got your touchdown.
The thing is, though, when you score a one-turn touchdown, it's the greatest feeling in the world. When it's scored against
Absolutely.
you and it works, you do kind of go, you know what? Yeah, all right,
Yeah.
well done. When it happens twice or 3 times, you do start to get a bit pissed off. But um, Robert is mentioning that he does have a chainsaw, which yeah, he's gonna love using against anyone he faces. Um, so I think goblins versus dwarves, you always probably favour the dwarves. It's another 6 points for Elliot. He's 12 points now at the top of that group. He's got enough to qualify with a wild card, having played 2 games. Um, so the battle for, I think, I don't know what you guys think. The battle for second here could be really, really interesting. I mean, you hope it's
Well,
interesting, Phil. I assume.
I hope it's interesting. I'll be honest. If I lose drastically again, I might just see how much pain I can cause everyone else. If there looks like there's not a single chance I'm gonna get out of the group, it'll just be like, fine, who shall I target? It'll be you, and then you, and then you. And so whoever does get through is gonna have the worst game ever. Because they don't have anybody to do anything with.
I love the fact that a lot of coaches are already thinking, okay, how do I do team development for season 7? We're not even up, we're not even close to the knockouts yet.
Well, my team development at precise moment is
Keep 'em alive.
tipping all the corn into the bin and bringing my elves back.
Speaking of elves, we will go on to our last game of the week.
Beautiful link, gentlemen. Almost.
It's as if I did it on
It's
purpose.
like we planned it, isn't it? It's like we know what we're doing. We've got Harrison back once again, Buffalo Biggins versus the Greystone Gladiators, in a result that I think puts and I don't know if Justin is still watching. So when we did our predictions, Scott, I very much put my money behind Greystone Gladiators getting out of this group. Absolutely, I did not. I think I still think they're in a really strong position to get out of this group. What I think is now making Justin was hanging on for this, so thank you, Justin, for hanging on for this game. What I think is going to be interesting to see now is that the Buffalo Biggins, strength-wise, they've got more strength than the Elves. They've come out of this game with a 2-0 win. When you look at kind of the breakdown of strength there, you've got 3 strength 4 and the rest are all strength 4 strength 4. The rest are all strength 3. You look at the vampire teams that are also in this group. Strength-wise, it's very similar, but they've got a bit more agility on those vampires. So I'll be interested. I would love for Justin to tell us where his mind is at the minute. If Scott, if you're Justin at this point, uh, first game, we know that you don't need to win all of your games to get out of this group. Justin won 3 and lost 3 last season and made it out of the group and made it through to quarterfinals as well. Um, are are you worried at the strength that you're facing in the group off the back of this result, or are vampires a very different challenge to orcs?
I think the vampires are definitely that different challenge there, Chris. I mean, you look at some of the skills. Justin's probably got one of, if not the best thrower that we've got in league, the coaches might say. But when he's got pass as a built-in, he's got sure feet, cannoneer, cloudburster, running pass. What do you think he's going to do? So I think if you don't get hold of him, but Harrison proved it is very doable. I think there's a lot left in this for Justin. Justin, we still got faith in you. And maybe a few quid on the bookies on the side as well. Looking forward. I still think it's very much one of those leagues. Harrison's set a really good pace for everybody to catch. Yes, other coaches can beat each other on the team. It's going to be great to see how Andy pitches up against the Gladiators as well, because again, he's got 5 vampires in terms of his setup. So he's gone vampire heaven. So that's one. If we're going to book something on the stream, I think that is one we'd love to see on the stream, Chris.
I will make a note. I will make a note of it. Phil, you played elves last season. You also did a lot of passing, a lot of completions for you. Um, One thing I think key to mention about Justin this season was going into this game. He did not have a reroll. It's after this game that he has been able to buy a reroll. So he went into this season with 0 rerolls at all. Got a win against our very own Tom in the first game. Has lost in this one. Still very open. Would you have confidence in the pace of your elves in a group like this against the vampires, which the vampires themselves are very agile and can do that kind of thing? Would you still have the confidence in what you can do?
I would. I played Tom in a couple of friendlies using the one at a time using my elves before the season started, and they were very evenly matched regarding sort of agility and passing, catching. The one thing you do have to watch out for is hypno gaze. That really is what the advantage that the vampires have over the elves regarding movement, I would say, because they suddenly take away all your tackle zones. And the vampires then have that free movement just to wander past you, and you have to remember to then reactivate those players on your next go, otherwise you've still lost them. And that was the thing that was stopping me when I was playing against Tom using my elves. That hypno gaze, taking your players out, basically out of the equation, without having doing any damage to it. They just stood there useless.
Looking
And
at this elf team that he has got here,
it's 4 catches. That's a
he's got
a lot of movement there.
a blodging sidestepping tackling blitzer, another blodging blitzer, a catch nerves of steel block catcher, catch nerves of steel block pro catcher, kick on alignment, which is always helpful, and like Scott said, that thrower is really racking up the skills for the throw. So it's it is a he's got some really good skills there, and the nerves of steel in particular could come in quite handy for just making things a little bit easier, sort of if he does get swamped by thralls in the other 2 games. Um, Scott,
One of the other things as well, Chris, if you have a look at it, we're talking about Justin, and he's got the tools. We know that, his team value is, almost 200k above in terms of our own Tom there. he's sort of almost 300k up in terms of the value. So it's going to be a really interesting decisions what Tom, Andy, and even Harrison to a lesser extent, although he's sort of 5 points in the good, what they do in terms of utilizing those inducements. Are they going to take star players? What else are they going to do to try and rein in those elves?
I think Justin, would like his next game to be against Andy, against his vampires. So yeah, inducement wise, it's not insignificant the amount of inducements that he's going to be giving away there, as the higher ranking team in the group. It's tricky. It's very tricky because I do still think experience wise, I think that Justin has the most experience in this group, and I think he will know how to come back and know how to adapt if he needs to, and know how to handle star players that come up because he may be more likely to have faced them before or used them before himself. So I still
Yeah.
think he's really got a good chance against this. If either of you two are a vampire coach, though, are you looking at this result against you're looking at what Harrison has done based, if you're just taking Harrison's performance last season, you're taking Justin's skill, you're looking at this result, you're looking at the team values. Have you got a little bit more confidence in being able to, what's still going to be a difficult fight, take the fight to Justin to try and take one of those top two spots?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because
I think
I say
Harrison.
yes, he's got all. I
Sorry.
say he's got all those skills. Um, and I'll be honest. Last season, I was keeping an eye on Justin's team. I also had Elven Union. I was looking at what he was giving his players and wondering, should I do the same? I figured he knew what he was doing. Um, do I copy it? Obviously, he went for the thrower catcher um route with the 4 catchers, where I would only sort of normally throw the once, and then I would run my catcher down the line. You could see that by looking at the skills my catcher ended up having with dodge and sprint. Um, being if I was a vampire team, with that hypno gaze, you can, like I say, nullify some of those um players to help get through. The only thing that will work against you is bloodlust. You just got to hope the rolls for that go in your favor. Otherwise, you could suddenly lose all your linemen, and then you're in trouble.
Scott, what do you think?
I think it's a great shout Phil makes. The other thing you look at it as well, we've talked about Harrison, and he's sitting proud at the top of the league there on 9 points. So he's wanted, there's still 4 matches he could possibly lose. So there's still everything to play for within this, because even though we talked about Scott and the Flumps earlier, he just needs, or is he going to go for 3 points in terms of casualties? Similar with Harrison, is Harrison going to be looking at the next 4 matches and thinking, okay, I'm now the guy to beat. I'm now the one who's setting the pace. What do I do? Do I just go and play my own game and go for the win? Or do I just go into each match thinking, as long as I can get 3 casualties and maybe score 3 touchdowns in at least one match, could get me those 3, 4 points, which all of a sudden I'm up to 12, 13 points. But as we know, with vampires, and we look at Tom in Group Nixon, we'll come on to it if we do, you know, vampires can be very, very scary to play against. Phil just mentioned the hypnotic gaze. We talked about the bloodlust. As much as we talked about this in the beginning of the season, they can either take you off the pitch as much as they can take themselves off the pitch. So I think this is why it'd be looking forward to seeing the biting bats against the Greystone Gladiators as one of our next matches.
We'll have a little look at the tables now. We'll just fly through them nice and quickly. So, looking at Johnson, Fighty Ducks currently sitting top of there, but they do have played an extra game over the Scale Marys, who are going to be looking to take that place back in their next fixture. Flumps currently sitting top of Bifford with the Odin's Ravens in second. Still very tight there though. There's not many points in it and similar number of games played there. Dwarves with the least number there, so could jump up a bit higher. Looking at Vermouth, Writers Ram sit pretty comfortably at the top, but I think James will be happy to be sitting second with OTFC. Other teams yet to play. Iceborne Raiders and Tetanus Hotspews sharing the top two spots there, very close between them. But again, Dead Star Belgrave yet to play, so could come in and cause some upsets there. In the group we were just looking at, Harrison sitting top, Justin sitting in second there. Two vampire teams, both with a game in hand, so we'll see what happens after those fixtures. Nixon, very, very close in Nixon. One game played everyone except for Simon, who's played three, but 3-2-2-1 there in that group, so all to play for there. And looking at finally at Murdrak, Numpty's
No,
sitting
don't
comfortably.
need to.
Yeah, we'll have a look. Numpty's
No.
sitting, looking like they've already qualified in the top of the group. Kraken Skull currently taking second place there purely on having conceded less. Sorry, Phil. Who's sitting then in third with Amazons yet to play at the bottom.
The nice thing is we've still got 3 coaches yet to make, make their bow in this season's matches. We've got in this league, Chris has got to come in. Are you going to say the name of his team there, Chris? Have you been practicing?
No. Would you like to try it?
I'm just calling them the Big Macs because I've got I've been subliminally converted by a commercial burger company. So we've got Chris to come in. We've got David and the Dead Star Belgrave, as you mentioned. You got Sam and the Double Yolks. So yeah, the excitement never stops.
It's normally at this point that I would tell you what fixtures are coming up on the live stream in the coming week. I'm not going to do that because we had, as Scott mentioned, we had a few technical issues, so we're just going to try and come up with a fix for those to make sure you can hear our coaches. So we'll confirm probably Wednesday whether there are any games that we're streaming. We'll bring you as many as we can, obviously, but we may end up with just too many things all happening at the same time. We may have to miss out, but we'll keep you updated on that. Looking at the fixtures that are coming this week, Dead Star Belgrave versus Iceborne Raiders. That's going to be a really interesting one on Thursday night. Harrison back in action against the Batfink Bloodletters on Friday night as well. Scott, our very own Scott, is up against Vampires on Friday also. We've then got coming this week Kid Gloves versus. Oh, you're doing a double. You're doing 2 games this week, Scott.
Yeah,
Against Kid
I'm
Gloves as well.
burning the brownie points this weekend. It's all in or nothing. So Friday night, ominous because Tom's in form. I think is he a number 11 vampire player on tour play or something ridiculous like that.
He is.
And
He's good.
yeah, I know. What do I know? Hey, so that's gonna be good. On the positive against Harry on Sunday, we'll have Rogers coming back, so that'll be something.
Think Mob versus What a Wonderful World. That'll see what the competition is like at the top of Johnson Group, and Cruel Britannia versus Cruel Britannia versus OTFC is next week. So we will talk about that the week after next. So just 5 games booked in. There may be some other ones booked in. Not everyone schedules them on Tour Play, so keep an eye out for games happening. That is it for our roundup. That's all our games gone through. Thank you very much, Scott, for coming back once again, and a huge thank you to Phil for joining us this week as well, especially considering your game this week. Thank you for coming and being willing to talk about it.
It was entertaining.
Thanks for it.
Maybe.
Thank you everyone for tuning in. We've had loads of people tuning in and chipping in, so thank you so much for everyone who has joined us this week. We will see you in a week's time for another roundup of all of the week's fixtures, and hopefully in a stream beforehand. But thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you all next time.